I don't know what charity case let you through the door, but this interview is over. Richard Sterling's voice dripped with contempt as he stared across his mahogany desk at Zara Williams. Howard University. Affirmative action special, I'm guessing? He didn't wait for an answer. 9 languages? Please. Community college Spanish doesn't count, sweetheart. Zara's knuckles whitened around her portfolio. 26 years old, summa cum laude, fluent in languages he couldn't even pronounce. Yet here she sat, being dismissed like yesterday's garbage. Sir, if you just look at my qualifications, I've seen enough. Sterling's resume hit the trash with deliberate force. Marcus, escort this girl out, and next time screen these people better. The word people hung in the air like poison. But in exactly 97 minutes, this same man would be begging her to save his billion-dollar empire. Have you ever watched someone's prejudice become their downfall? The elevator doors had barely closed behind Zara when Sterling's world began to collapse. Amanda burst through his office door, her face pale with panic. Mr. Sterling, we have a problem, a massive problem. Sterling barely looked up from his phone. What now? The Yamamoto Consortium just called. They're threatening to pull out of the acquisition unless we resolve the communication issues. The entire deal is falling apart. $1.2 billion. The biggest acquisition in Sterling Global's history. The deal that would cement his legacy as more than just his grandfather's heir. Get the interpreter team on a conference call. We'll sort this out. Amanda's hands shook as she held up her phone. Sir, the entire interpretation service just canceled. Food poisoning from the company lunch. All 12 interpreters are in the hospital. Sterling's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Hot liquid spread across Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. What do you mean, canceled? The final negotiation is in 2 hours. I've called every interpretation service in Manhattan. Nobody has native speakers available for Japanese, German, Russian, Arabic, Portuguese, Mandarin, and Italian, not on 2 hours' notice. The blood drained from Sterling's face. 7 different countries, 7 different languages, 7 different ways his empire could crumble. His grandfather's oil painting seemed to glare down at him from the wall. 3 generations of Sterling men had built this company, and he was about to lose it all because he couldn't speak a single foreign language. Sir? Amanda's voice sounded distant. What do we do? Sterling stared at his trash can. Inside, crumpled and coffee-stained, lay a resume that mentioned 9 languages. The same resume he'd thrown away 3 minutes ago. The girl, he whispered. The one I just... Where did she go? Security escorted her out, sir. Per your instructions. Sterling's hands gripped his desk until his knuckles turned white. The irony hit him like a freight train. The answer to his prayers had been sitting in his office, and he'd thrown her away like garbage. Find her, he said, his voice cracking. Find her now! Zara stood in the marble lobby, her reflection multiplied in the polished walls like a hall of mirrors showing her humiliation from every angle. The security guard's radio crackled behind her. Marcus to the front desk. The girl from 42 is still in the building. She should leave. Walk out those glass doors and never look back. But something kept her frozen in place. Maybe pride, maybe the need to understand how someone could be so cruel. That's when she heard it. Sterling's voice, desperate and panicked, echoing through his office speakerphone. The door was still open from Amanda's frantic entrance. Yamamoto-san is speaking too fast. I can't understand what he's saying. This deal is dying right now. Japanese voices poured through the speaker, rapid fire and increasingly agitated. Zara's head tilted instinctively. She'd spent 2 years in Kyoto, living with a host family who spoke no English. Her feet moved before her mind could stop them. Excuse me. Her voice cut through the chaos as she appeared in Sterling's doorway. I couldn't help but overhear. Sterling's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and desperate hope in 3 seconds. You're still here? Mr. Yamamoto is saying the cultural integration clause violates traditional Japanese business protocols. He's concerned about losing face with his board if the ceremony doesn't honor proper hierarchies. The room went silent. Even the voices from Tokyo paused. Sterling's mouth fell open. You understood all of that? Zara stepped forward, her confidence building with each word. He's also saying your previous negotiations show disrespect for Japanese customs. He's questioning whether Americans can truly understand international partnership. This is impossible, Sterling whispered. The phone rang again. This time, angry German voices filled the room. The German partners are frustrated because your team doesn't understand their regulatory concerns, Zara translated without missing a beat. They're saying the compliance framework you proposed violates European Union banking laws. Sterling's legs gave out. He sank into his chair as if someone had cut his strings. Amanda stared at Zara like she'd just performed magic. How are you? Another call. Portuguese this time, voices from Sao Paulo crackling with indignation. The Brazilians are upset because they feel your team doesn't respect Latin American business culture, Zara translated seamlessly. They're saying yesterday's video call was culturally insensitive. Sterling's world tilted on its axis. The temp receptionist he'd dismissed as beneath his notice was casually translating complex international business disputes in real time. This can't be happening, he muttered. But it was, and it got worse. The Moroccan partners called next, their Arabic flowing through the speaker. Zara's response was immediate and confident. They're concerned about Islamic banking compliance. Your contract structure conflicts with Sharia law regarding interest and investment partnerships. Sterling's Harvard MBA suddenly felt like expensive toilet paper. 4 years of business school, and he'd never learned that different cultures had different banking laws. Sir, Amanda whispered, how is she doing this? Russian voices erupted from the speaker, formal and stern. The Russians are demanding guarantees about intellectual property protection, Zara continued, switching between languages like changing radio stations. They want assurance that American patent laws won't override their technology rights. Each translation hit Sterling like a physical blow. His international company had been conducting business like Americans speaking louder to foreigners. Make it stop, he whispered. But the phone rang again, Chinese voices this time. Zara's response was immediate, her cultural understanding evident in every phrase. The Chinese partners are reconsidering the entire relationship. They're saying Sterling Global doesn't demonstrate the cultural intelligence necessary for serious international business. Sterling looked at the woman he'd called worthless 30 minutes ago. She stood in his office, switching between 7 languages like a human interpreter with a PhD in cultural studies. Who are you? He breathed. Zara's eyes met his, and for the first time since entering his office, she smiled. I'm Zara Williams, summa cum laude from Howard University, fluent in 9 languages, and apparently the only person in this building who can save your billion-dollar empire. The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross first. Finally, Sterling spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? Zara Williams wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be in her grandmother's kitchen in Brooklyn, learning to braid hair and speaking only English. She was supposed to accept limitations, lower expectations, and make herself smaller. Instead, at age 5, she'd listened to her Moroccan mother argue with landlords in Arabic, and her Jamaican father negotiate construction contracts in patois-tinged Spanish. Languages weren't subjects to study, they were survival tools. By 12, she was translating parent-teacher conferences. By 16, she was the family's bridge to every bureaucratic office in New York. Her parents worked 3 jobs each, but somehow scraped together money for language camps and cultural immersion programs. Education is the only inheritance we can give you, her mother had said, working double shifts to pay for Zara's SAT prep. Howard University wasn't her parents' first choice. It was their only choice, full scholarship or no college at all. While Sterling was pledging Harvard fraternities funded by his trust fund, Zara was sleeping 4 hours a night, balancing work-study jobs with doctoral-level linguistics courses. While he networked at Martha's Vineyard, she spent summers teaching English in refugee camps, learning Mandarin from Chinese exchange students, perfecting her Russian with immigrant families in Brighton Beach. Her thesis on cultural intelligence in global economics had been read by professors across 7 countries. She'd consulted for UNESCO, translated for small nonprofits, mediated international disputes for organizations that couldn't afford Sterling's fees. 73 job applications, 73 rejections. Not quite the right fit. Looking for someone with more traditional experience. We'll keep your resume on file. Each rejection felt like a door slamming shut. Each interview a reminder that her qualifications didn't matter if her face didn't match their expectations. But here's what Sterling didn't know as he watched his empire crumble. Zara Williams had spent her entire life proving herself to people who looked exactly like him. She'd been underestimated so many times that excellence had become her default setting. She wasn't just fluent in 9 languages, she was fluent in survival. And right now, watching the most powerful man she'd ever met panic about problems she could solve in her sleep, Zara realized something profound. For the first time in her life, she held all the power. The question was, what would she do with it? Sterling's corner office had transformed into a war room. Phones rang incessantly. Amanda paced behind his desk, fielding calls from panicked board members. The Brazilian partners were threatening to walk. "Put them on speaker," Sterling commanded, then looked at Zara with desperate eyes. "Please, just help me understand what they're saying." The voice from Sao Paulo crackled through the room, rapid Portuguese mixed with barely contained frustration. Zara stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. "Mr. Oliveira is saying their patience is at its limit. He feels Americans don't understand Brazilian business culture at all." Sterling's face went pale. "What did we do wrong?" More Portuguese erupted from the speaker. Zara listened intently, catching every nuance. "He's explaining that yesterday's video call was deeply offensive. Your team interrupted him 17 times, which in Brazilian culture shows profound disrespect. You also rushed through relationship building, which they consider essential before any business discussion. But we were being efficient. Efficiency without a relationship is insulting to them," Zara interrupted gently. "They're saying your approach treats them like a transaction, not a partnership." Sterling watched in amazement as Zara began responding in perfect Portuguese, her tone respectful, apologetic, warm. The change was immediate. The angry voices from Brazil softened, became curious. "They're asking who I am," Zara explained to Sterling. "They want to know why they're finally hearing someone who understands their perspective." Sterling's world tilted. This woman, the same woman he'd dismissed as unqualified, was effortlessly repairing relationships his team had spent months destroying. "Tell them." Sterling paused, swallowing his pride like broken glass. "Tell them you're our new Director of Cultural Relations." Zara's eyebrows rose slightly, but she translated smoothly. The response from Brazil was immediate and enthusiastic. "They're excited," Zara reported. "They're saying finally someone who understands. They want to restart negotiations immediately, but only if I'm leading the cultural integration discussions." Sterling felt his grandfather's portrait judging him from the wall. 3 generations of Sterling men, and none of them had ever needed to depend on someone they'd previously thrown away. "There's more," Zara continued as the Brazilians kept talking. "They're also mentioning a legal concern your team missed. Brazilian environmental law requires specific compliance measures for international acquisitions. Your current contract structure violates their sustainability requirements." Amanda stopped pacing. "Our legal team never mentioned that." "Because they don't understand Brazilian regulatory frameworks," Zara explained. "Mr. Oliveira is offering to send their environmental compliance documents, but only if we demonstrate we have someone who can properly review them." Sterling's hands shook as he reached for his coffee, then remembered he'd shattered the mug earlier. "Can you review them?" "I wrote my graduate thesis on international environmental law in emerging markets," Zara said simply. "I'm familiar with Brazilian regulatory structure." The silence in the room was deafening. Sterling's Harvard MBA suddenly felt like a participation trophy. "Mr. Sterling," came the voice from Brazil, "we have been considering canceling all partnerships with American companies due to cultural insensitivity. But this young woman has changed our perspective completely. We want to triple our investment, but only if she manages the relationship." Sterling's mouth went dry. Triple the investment, from the woman he'd called worthless 20 minutes ago. "So," Zara said quietly, "what's it going to be?" Sterling's office felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. The Brazilian success should have been a victory, but instead, it exposed everything wrong with his empire. "We need to discuss this," Sterling said, his voice strained. "Privately." Zara nodded but didn't move toward the door. This was his office, his company, his crisis. If he wanted privacy, he could ask his own people to leave. Amanda lingered, pretending to organize papers. Sterling's senior VP, Marcus Webb, had appeared during the Brazilian call and now stood like a sentinel by the window. "So," Sterling began, pacing behind his desk, "that was impressive. But we're talking about a billion-dollar acquisition here. I can't just hand over negotiations to someone who—" He stopped mid-sentence, realizing he was about to say something that would destroy any chance of her help. "Someone who what?" Zara's voice was deadly quiet. Webb stepped forward. "What Richard is trying to say is that we need someone with proper credentials, someone who understands the corporate hierarchy here." Zara's laugh was soft and bitter. "You mean someone who looks like you?" "Now that's not fair," Sterling started. "Isn't it?" Zara opened her portfolio, the same one Sterling had dismissed. "Let me share my improper credentials." She pulled out a letter, creased from being folded and unfolded countless times. "Recommendation from Professor Yamamoto at Tokyo University, where I spent 2 years studying international business law." Another document. "Consulting work for the European Union on cross-cultural communication strategies." Another. "Published research in the Harvard International Review on Emerging Market Dynamics." Each paper landed on Sterling's desk like a slap in the face. "Here's one from the Sorbonne, another from University of Sao Paulo. Oh, and this one's from American University in Cairo, where I spent a semester studying Islamic banking principles." Webb's face had gone ashen. Amanda had stopped pretending to work. "You want to talk about corporate hierarchy?" Zara continued. "I've consulted for organizations in 7 countries. I've mediated disputes between Fortune 500 companies and international partners. I've prevented 3 trade wars that you've never heard of because I helped resolve them before they made headlines." Sterling sank into his chair. Each credential was more impressive than anything his Harvard network had ever produced. "But here's what really matters," Zara said, her voice gaining strength. 30 minutes ago, your company was about to lose the biggest deal in its history. Your team, your properly credentialed, appropriately hierarchical team, had managed to offend partners in 4 different countries. She picked up his trash can and dumped its contents on his marble desk. Coffee grounds, crumpled papers, and her resume spread across the surface like evidence at a crime scene. "This is what you thought of my qualifications." Sterling stared at the mess, unable to speak. "I saved your Brazilian partnership. I identified legal issues your attorneys missed. I repaired cultural damage your team didn't even know they'd caused." Zara's voice never rose, but it filled the room like thunder. "And I did it all while you questioned whether I belonged here." Webb opened his mouth to speak, but Zara cut him off. "The Japanese partners are calling back in 15 minutes. The Germans after that. The Russians, the Moroccans, the Chinese, they're all waiting to see if Sterling Global has finally learned how to conduct international business." She looked directly at Sterling. "You have 2 choices. You can keep questioning my credentials while your empire collapses, or you can admit that maybe, just maybe, you don't know everything about running a global company." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, Tokyo's calling back. They sound upset." Sterling's hand hovered over the phone. Everything he'd built hung in the balance. "What's it going to be?" Zara asked. Sterling's hand trembled as he reached for the phone. "Put them through." The conference room filled with voices from around the world. 7 screens flickered to life, showing faces from Tokyo, Berlin, Moscow, Casablanca, Beijing, Rome, and Sao Paulo. The United Nations of Sterling's empire, all waiting to see if he could save himself. "Yamamoto-san," Sterling began awkwardly, "I understand there were some cultural concerns?" The response was swift and brutal. Rapid Japanese filled the room, the tone unmistakably hostile. Zara stepped forward without invitation, speaking fluent Japanese with perfect cultural courtesy. The change was immediate. The angry Japanese voices softened, became curious, almost pleased. "What did you say?" Sterling whispered. "I introduced myself properly and expressed a sincere desire to learn about Japanese culture and business customs," Zara replied, never taking her eyes off the screen. The conversation continued in Japanese, Zara's responses growing more confident with each exchange. Sterling watched in fascination as his company's biggest partner began actually smiling. "Mr. Yamamoto says he's never worked with Americans who understood the importance of hierarchy in Japanese business. Zara translated. He's willing to restart negotiations, but wants assurance that future communications will respect their cultural protocols. Before Sterling could respond, the Germans interrupted with their own concerns. Sharp, precise words filled the room. Zara switched languages like changing gears in a race car, responding in flawless German. The German executive's stern expression cracked into something resembling approval. More rapid German followed. They're saying our previous legal framework was amateur hour, Zara reported. But they're impressed that someone finally understands European banking regulations. They want to expand the partnership if we can demonstrate continued cultural competency. Sterling's head spun as Zara moved seamlessly between languages. Russian to address concerns about intellectual property, Arabic to discuss Islamic banking compliance, Mandarin to reassure Chinese partners about technology transfer agreements. Each conversation revealed another catastrophic mistake his team had made. Each translation exposed another layer of his ignorance about international business. But something extraordinary was happening. The hostile voices were becoming collaborative. The suspicious faces were brightening with genuine interest. "Miss Williams," came the voice from Brazil, "you are the first American who truly understands our values," Zara translated, but Sterling could see she was editing. The original comment had been more pointed. "What did he really say?" Sterling asked. Zara hesitated. "He said I'm the first American who doesn't treat them like they're stupid." The words hit Sterling like a physical blow. How many partnerships had he damaged? How many opportunities had he lost because he'd never bothered to learn what respect looked like in other cultures? "There's something else," Zara continued as the international chorus of voices grew more animated. "They want to propose something new." She listened to the overlapping conversations, her head tilting as she processed multiple languages simultaneously. They want to create an international cultural business charter, a framework that honors each culture's business values while creating unified standards for global partnerships. Sterling's mouth fell open. "They want to work together? All of them?" "More than that," Zara said, her voice filled with wonder. "They want Sterling Global to lead the initiative. They're saying this is the future of international business." The same company that had been hours away from complete collapse was suddenly being asked to revolutionize global commerce. Sterling looked at the woman he'd dismissed as worthless. She stood in his conference room like a conductor leading an orchestra of nations, creating harmony where he'd only managed to create chaos. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Zara smiled for the first time since entering his building. "This is what happens when you actually listen." Sterling's private office felt different now. The oil paintings of dead white men seemed to watch with new interest as he closed the door behind them. His hands shook as he poured himself 3 fingers of scotch. "I need to say something," he began, his voice hoarse from 2 hours of international crisis management. "What you just did there, I've never seen anything like it." Zara remained standing, her portfolio still clutched against her chest like armor. 30 years I've been in this business," Sterling continued, staring into his glass. "Built this company on what I thought was expertise. Turns out I've been conducting international business like a tourist with a loud voice." He walked to his trash can, reached inside, and pulled out her crumpled resume. Coffee stains had turned the edges brown, but the words were still legible. "Summa cum laude, 9 languages, cultural competency certifications from 7 countries. He smoothed the paper carefully on his desk. "I threw this away without reading it." Zara's grip on her portfolio loosened slightly. "You know what the worst part is? I built my reputation on international deals. Harvard Business School case studies written about my global vision. But you just proved I don't know the first thing about working with other cultures." Sterling opened his desk drawer and pulled out a frame, expensive mahogany with gold corners. He placed Zara's resume inside and set it prominently on his desk. "I'm offering you the position of Director of International Cultural Strategy. Starting salary $180,000. Direct report to the board, your own team, your own budget." Zara's eyebrows rose. "That's more than the position I originally applied for. That position doesn't exist anymore. What you just did, that's bigger than anything we've ever attempted." Sterling's voice grew stronger. I want you to design cultural competency training for our entire senior staff. I want you to review every international contract we've ever signed. I want you to help me rebuild this company the right way." For the first time since entering his office, Zara sat down. "There's something else," Sterling continued. He pulled out a crystal award from his credenza, the Sterling Excellence Award, typically reserved for 20-year veterans. "I want you to present our new cultural integration strategy at the annual shareholders meeting next month. 500 investors, international media, Fortune 500 executives." Zara stared at the award. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate—" "I'm not finished." He leaned forward, his eyes serious. "I want to establish the Sterling Global Cultural Excellence Center. I want your methodology taught in business schools. I want other companies to license your approach." The magnitude of his offer hung in the air between them. "Why?" Zara asked quietly. Sterling was quiet for a long moment. "Because 30 minutes ago I was the CEO of a failing company who'd just thrown away the one person who could save it. Because I've spent my entire career thinking success meant surrounding myself with people who look and think exactly like me." He gestured to the international flags now visible through his window. "You didn't just save my deals, Zara. You showed me what real leadership looks like." Zara's eyes glistened as she finally understood. She wasn't just getting a job. She was getting the chance to change everything. The executive break room on the 42nd floor was a world away from the chaos of international negotiations. Zara sat alone at the marble island, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Her hands still trembled slightly from the adrenaline of saving Sterling's empire. The door opened quietly. Carmen, the evening cleaning supervisor, wheeled her cart inside, then stopped when she saw Zara. "Oh, I'm sorry, miss. I didn't know anyone was—" "Please don't apologize," Zara said quickly, switching to Spanish. "I was just taking a moment to breathe." Carmen's eyes widened at hearing her native language. "You speak Spanish?" "9 languages, actually." Zara gestured to the chair across from her. "Would you like to sit for a moment? You look tired." Carmen glanced toward the door nervously, then sat down. "I heard what happened today. The whole building is talking about the woman who saved Mr. Sterling's company." "That's me, I suppose." Zara's voice carried no pride, just exhaustion. "I also heard how he treated you this morning, throwing your resume in the trash, calling security." Carmen's voice dropped to a whisper. "I've cleaned his office for 8 years. I've seen him do that to others like us." Zara looked up sharply. "Others like us?" Carmen pulled out her phone, showing Zara a photo of a graduation ceremony. "That's me receiving my doctorate in biochemistry from Universidad Nacional de Colombia. I came here 15 years ago, but my credentials aren't recognized, so I clean offices." The weight of those words settled between them like a stone. "Carmen, that's incredible. You're a scientist." "Was a scientist," Carmen corrected. "Here, I'm just the cleaning lady, but you proved that we belong in these boardrooms. You showed them that intelligence doesn't have a uniform." Zara felt tears building behind her eyes. "I was so focused on proving myself to Sterling, I never thought about everyone else watching." Carmen reached into her cart and pulled out a small paper flower, carefully folded from coffee shop napkins. "My daughter taught me this. She says when you throw away something beautiful, it doesn't stop being beautiful. It just waits for someone to notice." She placed the flower in Zara's palm. "You didn't just save his company today. You showed every Carmen, every Miguel, every Fatu in this building that our worth isn't determined by other people's blindness." Zara closed her fingers around the delicate creation. "What if I could change things? Not just for me, but for everyone." Carmen smiled, the first genuine smile Zara had seen all day. "Then maybe that man throwing away your resume was exactly what needed to happen. Sometimes the universe puts the right person in the right place at exactly the right moment." As Carmen wheeled her cart toward the door, she paused. "Your real work is just beginning, mija. Don't forget about us when you're changing the world." The paper flower felt impossibly light in Zara's palm, but somehow carried the weight of every dream deferred, every talent overlooked, every person dismissed because they didn't fit someone else's narrow definition of worth. The emergency board meeting was called for 7 p.m. By 6:30, Sterling's conference room looked like a war zone. Empty coffee cups littered the table. Phones rang constantly. The billion-dollar deal that had seemed saved was collapsing again. "Explain to me how we went from triumph to disaster in 4 hours," Sterling demanded, his voice hoarse from crisis management. Amanda's hands shook as she read from her notes. The Japanese and German partners had a cultural collision during the follow-up call, something about decision-making protocols. It escalated quickly. Zara studied the timeline on the whiteboard. Years of Sterling's cultural insensitivity had created a house of cards. One success wasn't enough to rebuild trust that had been systematically destroyed. "What exactly happened?" she asked. "The Germans wanted to streamline the decision process," Amanda explained. "They proposed bypassing what they called unnecessary consensus building. The Japanese partners felt this showed profound disrespect for their business traditions." Sterling slumped in his chair. "So they're both pulling out? Worse. They're telling the other partners that Sterling Global doesn't understand international business fundamentals. The Russians are reconsidering. The Moroccans are demanding guarantees we can't provide. The Chinese are questioning our cultural competency." The door burst open. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the only board member who had consistently supported diversity initiatives, strode in looking grim. "Richard, I just got off the phone with our biggest investors. They're panicking. Stock price is down 12% in after-hours trading. The media is calling it Sterling's billion-dollar blunder." Sterling's face went ashen. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that 3 board members are calling for your removal as CEO." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sterling had inherited this company from his grandfather and built his entire identity around being its leader. Now it was crumbling because he'd never learned to see beyond his own cultural bubble. "There's something else," Rodriguez continued, looking directly at Zara. "The international partners aren't just angry about today's miscommunication. They're furious about years of feeling disrespected by our company's approach to international business." Zara stood up slowly. "What are they saying specifically?" "Sterling Global treats international partnerships like colonial relationships, that we expect them to adapt to American business culture without ever trying to understand theirs." The accusation hit Sterling like a physical blow. His grandfather's portrait on the wall suddenly looked less like inspiration and more like indictment. "They want proof that we've fundamentally changed our approach," Rodriguez continued. "Not just better translation, but complete cultural transformation." Sterling looked at Zara with desperate eyes. "Can you fix this?" Zara was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of the challenge. "Mr. Sterling, this isn't about fixing a communication problem. This is about rebuilding trust that's been broken over years of cultural arrogance." "How long do we have?" Sterling asked. "The partners are meeting virtually in 1 hour to decide whether to continue negotiations," Amanda reported. "If they walk, the deal dies permanently." Zara walked to the whiteboard and began sketching a complex diagram. "I need to create something that's never been done before, a comprehensive cultural integration framework that addresses each partner's specific concerns while creating unified business standards." "Is that even possible?" Rodriguez asked. "I don't know," Zara admitted, "but it's our only chance." For the next 45 minutes, Zara worked with intense focus. She created detailed protocols for Japanese consensus building that satisfied German efficiency requirements. She designed decision-making frameworks that honored Russian formality while embracing Brazilian relationship building. She integrated Islamic banking principles with Chinese technology transfer concerns. Sterling watched in amazement as she constructed a business model that treated cultural differences as competitive advantages rather than obstacles to overcome. "This is brilliant," Rodriguez whispered, studying the framework. "You're not just solving communication problems, you're creating a new model for international business." At 7:45, the video conference began. 7 screens filled with the faces of partners who had built Sterling Global's international empire. Now they looked like judges preparing to deliver a verdict. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zara began, her voice steady despite the enormous pressure. "I want to apologize for years of cultural insensitivity from Sterling Global. Today's miscommunication wasn't an isolated incident. It was the inevitable result of an American company that never learned to truly respect international partnership. The faces on screen remained impassive. But I'm here to propose something revolutionary. Not just better communication, but a complete transformation of how international business is conducted. She presented her cultural integration charter, explaining how each element honored specific cultural values while creating synergy across partnerships. The Japanese consensus model that improved German efficiency, the Russian formality protocols that enhanced Brazilian relationship building, the Islamic ethical frameworks that strengthened Chinese technology partnerships. As she spoke, something extraordinary happened. The suspicious faces began showing interest. Partners started asking questions that built on each other's concerns. The adversarial dynamic transformed into collaborative problem-solving. This is not theoretical, Zara concluded. I'm proposing that Sterling Global become the first truly multicultural corporation, where cultural intelligence is as important as financial intelligence, where international partnership means genuine equality, not American dominance with foreign accents. The silence that followed felt eternal. Finally, Mr. Yamamoto from Tokyo spoke. Miss Williams, in 30 years of international business, I have never seen such comprehensive cultural understanding from an American company. The German representative nodded slowly. This systematic approach to cultural integration addresses every concern we've raised over 5 years of partnership. One by one, the international partners endorsed not just continuing the deal, but expanding it. They wanted to license Zara's framework. They wanted to create joint ventures based on her model. They wanted Sterling Global to lead a transformation of international business practices. Sterling sat speechless as his failing company was suddenly offered the opportunity to revolutionize global commerce. There's one condition, the Brazilian partner added. Miss Williams must be given complete authority over all international relationships. No more American arrogance disguised as efficiency. All eyes turned to Sterling. The same man who had thrown Zara's resume in the trash 8 hours ago was being asked to make her the most powerful person in his company. Done, he said without hesitation. Rodriguez leaned over and whispered, Richard, do you understand what just happened? You didn't just save the company. You just became the leader of a business revolution. Sterling looked at Zara, who was calmly fielding questions from 7 different countries in 7 different languages, and realized that his grandfather's company had just evolved into something far greater than anything 3 generations of Sterling men had ever imagined. The woman he'd dismissed as worthless had just made him the most important CEO in international business. 1 month later, the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom buzzed with anticipation. 500 of the most powerful people in international business had gathered for Sterling Global's annual shareholders meeting. But today wasn't about quarterly reports or stock performance. Today was about transformation. Zara stood backstage, adjusting the microphone clipped to her blazer. Through the curtain, she could see faces that had once been unimaginable to her. Fortune 500 CEOs, international investors, business school deans, financial journalists from around the world. Are you ready for this? Dr. Rodriguez appeared beside her, wearing the satisfied smile of someone who had bet on the right horse. As ready as someone can be to address the people who would have thrown out my resume a month ago, Zara replied. Times change. People change. Sometimes they have to. The lights dimmed in the ballroom. Sterling walked onto the stage, but his usual commanding presence was replaced by something humbler, more authentic. Ladies and gentlemen, 35 days ago, I made the most expensive mistake of my career. His voice carried across the silent room. I dismissed someone without reading her qualifications. I let prejudice cloud my judgment, and I nearly destroyed everything my family built over 3 generations. Murmurs rippled through the audience. This wasn't the typical corporate presentation they'd expected. That mistake almost cost us a billion-dollar acquisition. But more importantly, it almost cost us the opportunity to evolve into something better than we ever imagined possible. He gestured toward the wings. Today, I want to introduce you to the woman who didn't just save Sterling Global. She revolutionized how we think about international business. Zara walked onto the stage to polite applause that grew stronger as Sterling continued. Zara Williams was rejected by 73 companies before she walked into my office, including mine. We saw her resume and made assumptions based on her university, her background, her appearance. We were all wrong. The applause stopped. The room had gone completely silent. Sterling's voice grew stronger. In the past month, Zara's cultural integration framework has been implemented by 17 Fortune 500 companies. Harvard Business School is developing an entire curriculum around her methodology. The International Chamber of Commerce wants to make her approach the global standard for cross-cultural business. He turned to Zara. But tonight, she's going to tell you something that will change how you think about talent, opportunity, and what real leadership looks like. Zara stepped to the podium, looking out at an audience that represented the pinnacle of American business power. A month ago, most of these people wouldn't have given her a second glance. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, but before I begin, I want you to know that this speech will be different from what you're expecting. She pressed a button on her remote. The screen behind her showed a simple photograph, her resume, crumpled and coffee-stained, sitting in Sterling's trash can. This is where my qualifications ended up 35 days ago. Summa cum laude from Howard University, fluent in 9 languages, research published in international journals. All of it was dismissed in 30 seconds because it didn't match someone's expectations. The audience shifted uncomfortably. But I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to show you what you're missing when you make decisions based on assumptions rather than evidence. She clicked to the next slide. A world map highlighting Sterling Global's new international partnerships. In the past month, our cultural integration framework has increased international partnership satisfaction by 89%. Revenue from global operations is up 43%. We've prevented 7 potential trade disputes that could have cost billions in lost business. The numbers spoke louder than any accusation. But here's what's more important. She clicked again. The screen showed photographs of people, Carmen in a laboratory coat, Miguel in a boardroom presenting to executives, Fatu meeting with African business leaders. Carmen has a doctorate in biochemistry from Columbia. For 8 years, she cleaned offices because her credentials weren't recognized. Today, she leads our environmental compliance division. The audience began paying closer attention. Miguel has a master's in international economics from Mexico City. He worked security for 6 years. Now he manages our Latin American partnerships. Another photo appeared. Fatu has degrees in international relations from Senegal and speaks 5 languages. She served food in our cafeteria. Today, she's developing our African market expansion strategy. Zara let the implications settle over the room. Ladies and gentlemen, talent doesn't have a pedigree. Excellence doesn't come with the right accent or the right zip code. The most expensive mistake in business isn't a bad investment. It's overlooking genius because it doesn't match your expectations. She clicked on a new slide showing statistics. In the past month, Sterling Global's Hidden Talent Initiative has identified 47 employees working below their qualifications, 47 solutions to problems we didn't even know we had. The applause started slowly, then built as the implications became clear. We're not just changing hiring practices. We're changing how we see potential. We're proving that diversity isn't charity, it's competitive advantage. Sterling watched from the side of the stage as his company's transformation was documented in real time. Financial journalists were taking notes, business school professors were recording her speech, competitor CEOs were calculating how quickly they could implement similar programs. The cultural integration framework isn't just about language translation, Zara continued. It's about recognizing that different perspectives create better solutions. That cultural intelligence is as valuable as financial intelligence, that the future belongs to organizations brave enough to look for talent everywhere, not just in the places they've always looked. She clicked to her final slide. A simple quote in multiple languages, all saying the same thing. Excellence has no nationality. 35 days ago, I was unemployed, living with roommates, wondering if my education was worthless. Today, I'm standing before you because one man was brave enough to admit he was wrong and smart enough to recognize potential when he finally saw it. She turned to Sterling. But this isn't about me. This is about every qualified person sitting in every reception area, cleaning every office, serving every meal, who has skills we desperately need but refuse to see. The standing ovation began before she finished speaking. Sterling joined her at the podium, holding the Sterling Excellence Award, the company's highest honor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I'm proud to present the first annual Sterling Global Cultural Innovation Award to Zara Williams, our Chief Cultural Integration Officer and the architect of the future of international business." As Zara accepted the Crystal Award, cameras flashed throughout the ballroom. Tomorrow, her story will be featured in business publications around the world. Harvard would offer her a teaching position. 3 competing companies would try to recruit her. But tonight, holding Carmen's paper flower in her pocket and looking out at an audience that finally saw her worth, Zara Williams understood that the real victory wasn't personal recognition. It was proof that when one door opens for someone like her, it becomes easier for the next person to walk through. 6 months later, Zara stood before the United Nations General Assembly, addressing delegates from 193 countries. The girl who had been dismissed from a job interview was now speaking about economic inclusion on the world's biggest stage. "Excellencies, distinguished delegates," she began, her voice carrying the same quiet confidence that had saved Sterling Global. "Today I want to talk about the most wasteful form of economic inequality, the systematic overlooking of human potential." In the audience, Sterling watched with genuine pride. His company's stock had reached all-time highs. The cultural integration framework was now taught in business schools across 4 continents. But more importantly, he had learned to see talent where he'd never looked before. The Williams Protocol, as Harvard Business School had named it, was being implemented by 68 multinational corporations. Carmen's biochemistry research had led to 3 breakthrough patents. Miguel's economic insights had opened markets in 7 Latin American countries. Fatu's cultural intelligence had prevented 2 international trade disputes. "But this isn't just a business story," Zara continued from the UN podium. "This is about recognizing that excellence exists in every community, every background, every circumstance. The question isn't whether talent is evenly distributed, it is. The question is whether there will be an opportunity." She clicked a slide showing statistics that made delegates lean forward in their seats. In the past 6 months, companies using cultural integration protocols have identified over 2,000 employees working below their qualifications, 2,000 solutions to problems we didn't even know we had, 2,000 examples of potential waiting to be recognized. The numbers told a story of systematic waste. Brilliant minds cleaning offices, multilingual experts serving food, innovative thinkers driving delivery trucks, not because they lacked ability, but because they lacked opportunity. "Right now, someone brilliant is being overlooked in your office, your community, your daily life," Zara said, her voice growing stronger. "The person cleaning your building might have advanced degrees. The person serving your coffee might speak 5 languages. The person you walk past every day might have exactly the skills your organization desperately needs." In conference rooms around the world, executives were watching the live stream, taking notes and calculating the cost of their own blind spots. Sterling's phone buzzed constantly with interview requests. But the real measure of success was the email he'd received that morning from a janitor at Goldman Sachs, a former engineering professor from Syria who wanted to know if Sterling Global was still looking for overlooked talent. That evening, Sterling sat in his office looking at Zara's framed resume on his desk, the same resume he'd thrown away 6 months ago. Next to it sat Carmen's paper flower, now mounted in crystal, a reminder that beauty exists even in discarded things. His grandfather's portrait had been replaced with a photo from the UN speech. Zara addressing world leaders, representing not just Sterling Global, but a new way of seeing human potential. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling, there's a young man here about the engineering position. He graduated from Baghdad University, speaks 4 languages, and has been driving a taxi for 3 years. Sterling smiled, remembering his own transformation. "Send him up. And Amanda, this time I'm going to read his resume. Tomorrow I challenge you to do something different. Have one real conversation with someone whose potential you've never considered. Ask the person who cleans your office about their background. Talk to your delivery driver about their dreams. Listen to the cashier who speaks with an accent. They might speak 5 languages. Share this story if you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, where you went to school, or where you come from. Comment below. I see myself in this story, if Zara's journey resonates with you." Tag someone who deserves recognition for their hidden talents. Like this video if you believe talent has no uniform, no accent, no pedigree. Subscribe if you want to see more stories about people who prove that excellence exists everywhere. You just have to be brave enough to recognize it. Here's what you can do right now. Sterling Global's Hidden Talent Initiative is accepting applications worldwide. Visit our website to nominate someone whose potential has been overlooked. Help us find the next Zara, the next Carmen, the next brilliant mind waiting for their chance. Because the most expensive mistake in business isn't a bad investment. It's overlooking the genius standing right in front of you. Who in your life has potential you haven't recognized yet?